Okay. Good evening and welcome to the Council Budget Meeting for Wednesday, November 22nd, 2023. Please rise for the playing of the National Anthem at a moment of reflection. I will now look to Councilor Ratliff to read the land acknowledgement.
The land on which Council meets today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many Indigenous peoples made up of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. The Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement should remind us of our responsibility to ensure the Dish, the territories on which we live and work, is never emptied, and that we take care of the land and its inhabitants in a way that ensures its future sustainability.
Thank you, Councilor Ratliff. Chair's report is number 1. As you know, I don't normally go through lengthy chair's reports, but today I wanted to just review the budget approval procedure for council and also for anyone watching from the public, as it is different with the strong mayor power legislation that we're working under now. So today, staff will present draft budgets for council's information. We can ask questions, of course, but we will not be voting on budget issues today. We will then, after this meeting, have information sessions for the public for the balance of the year, including open houses, a telephone town hall. We will have interactive kiosks at different locations, and we also will have workshops for councilors. Then the mayor, under the new procedure, tables his proposed budget, which will have input from what you will see today, on January 3rd, and council gets a presentation on January 10th from staff on that budget. After January 10th, we can consider amendments to those budgets, which the mayor, under his new powers, could potentially veto. And then final approval of the budget could potentially be as late as February 26th, depending on how the amendment and veto process proceeds. So that's the target date to, for sure, have budgets approved. And that is late, considering past history, so it is definitely my intention to approve the budget earlier next year once we're familiar with the new procedures. Thank you. So we will go to the adoption of the agenda, and I will ask the deputy clerk to tell us about potential amendments or other information.
So there are no amendments to this evening's agenda, but 3 items of additional correspondence have been placed in Council's SugarSync folder. There's a confidential memorandum from Financial Management Services regarding options to reduce the tax levy impact in 2024 to 0%. This memo is referenced as Appendix 10 in Report FMS 175-2023, which is the staff proposed operating budget. There is a confidential memorandum from the St. Catharines Public Library regarding the council motion from November 1st, 2023. And there is a confidential memorandum from the Director of Financial Management Services regarding Sonic's fire financial impact demonstrated in second quarter variance report. And this memo is referenced in item 6.1 on tonight's agenda.
Thank you, Deputy Clerk. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda, please? Councilor Stevens, do I have a seconder? Mayor Cisco, all in favor? Is anyone opposed? Okay, so that's carried. Adoption of minutes, there are none. Declarations of interest, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Don't see any, but a reminder that councilors are required to submit written statements of declaration via the online form. So we will now move to our consent reports. And the motion is that council approve the consent agenda, save and accept those items brought forward for discussion. I will look to the deputy clerk first of all. Has anybody pulled anything from the consent agenda? No? Okay, so I will ask for a councilor to move the consent agenda. Councilor Miller? Okay. So, oh, sorry.
I just have a procedural question.
Yes.
The 6.2, will there be a future chance to talk about what's in 6.2? Or will it be coming up again through our budget discussions? I think it's 6.2, yeah.
I would look to Director Douglas to comment on that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, item 6.2 is the third quarter capital variance. Is that the report you're referencing? Or is it 6.3, the memos from the Meridian Center and Performing Arts Center?
Actually, I think I was talking about the correspondence with regards to Appendix 4. So Appendix 4 talks about cost savings in the budget. Which, is that in the consent?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, that is part of one of the open discussion items coming up later in the agenda.
And so, just through you, Chair, will we have to go into closed session to talk about that?
Director?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if the council members have questions with regards to Appendix 10, which
Appendix 10, yeah.
has matters related to permanent staffing, and their questions, then we would need to go into
All right.
closed session.
Yeah, sorry, I thought it was in the consent reports, but I'm wrong, so, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we had a motion to move the consent agenda from Councilor Miller, I believe. So I will look to the deputy clerk to share the consent agenda.
So today's consent agenda, item 6.1, Financial Management Services, year-to-date report, 2023 third quarter operating variance and forecast report. Item 6.2, Financial Management Services, capital project report for third quarter ended September 30th, 2023. And item 6.3, Legal and Clerk Services, Council Correspondence. So the vote on that, Councillor Miller. Oh, my apologies, I'm just going to get into voting mode first. Councillor Miller?
Yes.
Councillor McPherson?
Yes.
Councillor Lindell?
Yes.
Councillor Kushner?
Yes.
Counselor Harris,
Yes.
Counselor Dodge,
Yes.
Counselor Phillips,
Yes.
Counselor Ratzlaff,
Yes.
Counselor Stevens,
Yes.
Counselor Williamson,
Yes.
Mayor Cisco,
In favor?
and Chair Garcia.
Yes.
And that's carried.
Thank you, Deputy Clerk. So move to number 7, presentations. There are none. So we will move to number 8, which is discussion reports. So I will now look to CAO David Oakes for a brief introduction of the multi-year staff proposed capital water and wastewater and operating budgets. There will be a presentation after that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to take an opportunity to, number one, thank our staff team for the time and effort that's been put into the development of this is our first multi-year budget. So essentially, we have 3 years of operating budget, 3 years of capital budget, 3 years of water, wastewater budgets that have been developed in partnership with all of the departments through the budget office and financial management. So it's been a really monumental undertaking to be able to do that and bring it forward to council in the timeframes that we've been working through. In addition to that, we obviously have, as you had noted earlier, a new process under the Strong Mayor legislation in terms of how the budgets are in fact going to be approved. And the big part of that and the opportunity that actually presents is directly related to what we heard from council this past year and in fact years prior, where we have in the past traditionally done our budget presentations. We have, last year we provided opportunities to have council workshops. That was done over a course of several weeks. What we are doing this year, and hearing loud and clear from council, this council in particular, is we are providing a significant amount of time for council and the public to be engaged in the budget discussion. So tonight really is the opportunity for staff to be able to present the operating, the capital budgets, as well as the water and wastewater. And we're gonna have over the series, or over the next 6 weeks, essentially prior to January 3rd, quite a few opportunities for the public to be engaged through a survey portal that'll be launched in later this week. Open houses, we have a new process where we're gonna have some additional kiosks, budget sessions and opportunities for the public at the Penn Center, the Market Square, other areas. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity for the public to provide input into the budget process this year, which will help the mayor when he, in fact, tables his budget in January. The big points that I just want council to be aware, we have all of the feedback that we've heard, in particular this year, this term of council. We've heard you. You know, there's a strong notion within the community and within council about taxpayer affordability. This budget, all of them have really been looked at and developed through that lens from the staff perspective. They are coming within the guidance that council approved for all 3 years. We have also, from the direction that council provided, we have included the path to zero, what that looks like for council's consideration. Staff do not recommend, you know, going down that path, but it's something that for council to consider. There are opportunities within those pieces of information, and we welcome council discussion and questions on that. And that's really what the next several weeks or months actually are going to allow us to have that discussion through the various open houses and workshops with council in particular. I just want to make sure that I'm catching everything. We've also, as noted this year, when we talked through the tax rates, We've included the business cases for any new staffing positions for the consideration of council, as well as the development of the mitigation program utilizing the gapping dollar. So all of that information and those requests have been included in the information package that council has. Essentially, I think, Sarah, we can go to the next slide. Thank you. Apologies, I just want to make sure we get everything covered here. Yeah, so this, and there'll be more detail and more specifics in terms of what the dates look like, when they are for the telephone town hall, the public open houses, but we're essentially looking at tonight as the beginning of the budget process and the beginning of the council discussion and the input and engagement with the community. We're hoping that, over the next 6 weeks, we'll be able to get a lot of input and feedback that will feed into the mayor. So any amendments, any specific changes or requests that are going to be coming from council will be going to the mayor. But tonight is really an opportunity for us to provide an overview of the 3 budgets that I had mentioned, but also under the multi-year. So there's been a lot of time, energy, and there's a ton of information, and we appreciate that. It can be overwhelming when both council and the public see all of the documents. So that's why we wanted to have a very robust and comprehensive public engagement program in November and essentially December to help provide that input into the January 2024, 2025, 2026 budgets. So I will leave it at that, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to provide that overview.
Thank you to the Chief Administrative Officer for that, as he reemphasized some of the things that I had said already, but I think it's so important because it is a new process and none of us are really familiar with it. I would just add, since he was talking about the dates, that we all in council received a memorandum for the city clerk with a chart that lists all of these dates and when things are happening. So it would be a good thing to print and have with you because it has all the details on it. So with that, I will move to the first discussion item, which is 8.1, Financial Management Services Director, 2024 to 2026, multi-year staff proposed capital budget, 4-year forecast, and asset management status. And I now call upon Anthony Martuccio, Director of Engineering, Facilities, and Environmental Services, Tim Marotta, Manager of Engineering and Construction, Phil Christie, Director of Community, Recreation, and Cultural Services, and Richie Chung, Capital Planning Supervisor, to provide a presentation regarding the 2024 multi-year staff proposed capital budget, 4-year forecast, and asset management status. Director?
Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair. Good afternoon, Budget Chair, General Committee members, citizens, and senior staff. Before you tonight is the proposed 2024 to 2026 capital budget and 4-year forecast. The proposed 2024 capital budget and 4-year forecast is a result of a collaborative effort amongst the various city departments that started in Q2 of 2023. It recognizes the need to ensure that all city-owned infrastructure assets are sustainable into the future so that we can continue to provide basic core services, as well as a desire to enhance the quality of life for our residents and minimize environmental impacts while recognizing our economic challenges. The budget was developed keeping in mind many of the corporate strategies, such as the Transportation Master Plan, the Water Wastewater 10-year financial plan, the Fire Master Plan, Climate Adaptation Plan, and the asset management plans that were recently approved. On the slide, we have grouped the various strategies, plans, and studies as to how they align with Council's overall strategic plan. This slide illustrates some key initiatives and projects included in the proposed multi-year capital budget and how they align with Council's approved strategic pillars. Growth, taxpayer affordability, and asset sustainability present both challenges and opportunities in the development of a municipality's capital program. These three primary considerations were front of mind during the development of the proposed capital budget. Another factor that drives the capital programs are their alignments to legislative requirements, maintaining services, and aligning to strategic priorities. 88% of our projects are aligned to legislative requirements, which lead to a challenging environment for prioritization. The prioritization process that the city's senior leadership, subject matter experts, and project managers perform is critical to ensuring that the capital budget balances growth, taxpayer affordability, and asset sustainability. To further assist with prioritization, staff referenced the existing information that was utilized to create the council-endorsed asset management plans. In creating these plans, we have begun to develop decision-making tools to help inform and support decisions, all while incorporating risk into our decision-making process. This, along with the prioritization criteria listed in the green box above, were used to help establish the proposed capital budget. The following table is borrowed from the asset management plan that was approved by council last month. This table provides a snapshot of the city's current asset inventory. The asset management plan recommends that either the city increase funding or reduce levels of service. Without either of these actions, the city's backlog of projects will continue to grow. If we want to eliminate the backlog, an annual capital budget of approximately $173 million, comprising just of asset renewal projects, would be required. For comparison, the proposed 2024 to 2026 average annual capital budget for renewal projects is approximately $65 million. I will now turn things over to the city's Manager of Engineering and Construction, Tim Murata.
The next 11 slides will provide a snapshot of the average annual proposed capital budget for each asset class, the location of the proposed projects, and the expected condition performance of the asset class based on the funding levels. Details on the projects can be found in the draft 2024-2026 capital budget book in Appendix 1. First slide is transportation. Transportation assets include things like roads, active transportation, sidewalks, paths, as well as right-of-way assets like traffic signals, signs, and street lights. Together, these assets aim to provide a safe, efficient, accessible, and sustainable transportation system for multiple modes of transportation in accordance with regulatory requirements and the expectations of our community. The continued maintenance, repair, and renewal of these assets is critical in order to promote activity, livability, and connectivity, and result in a network of transportation infrastructure that enables people and goods to travel seamlessly, utilizing many modes of transportation. Transportation assets are primarily tax-based expenditures, and as identified in the asset management plan, this asset class is currently underfunded. The works we've proposed continue to have a strong focus on the renewal and expansion of active transportation facilities, such as multi-use paths. This slide will be similar to the ones you're about to see. So just a couple of things to point out just for orientation. On the one side, we have the map. We've organized the projects, right? It's a 3-year budget, so we've organized the projects on the map by color. You can see the blue is 2024. We have green, those proposed for 2025, and a bit of a typo up there, but 2026 is the pink. Adjacent to that there on the other side, you can see the chart in this particular asset transportation. You can see how the quality of that asset over time is degrading, right? We're getting more red. That red is showing a very poor condition. So that's just to give you a quick glance to look at visually where we're proposing the work, as well as how these different assets are looking to be as we go through the projects. And maintain these current funding levels. Bridges and culverts. The city follows the standards and best practices as outlined in the Ontario Structure Inspection Manual to determine the condition of our bridges and culverts. Third-party consultants who are experts in the design and assessment of bridges are engaged to complete these assessments. The inspection of bridges with a span of 3 meters or greater are legislated to be inspected every 2 years. Both pedestrian bridges and roadway structures are replaced when they reach the end of their useful life. Rehabilitation is undertaken to prolong the life of the asset. The recommended works are determined through inspections undertaken every 2 years or as recommended. The water distribution system provides safe and reliable drinking water and supports fire suppression for the residents and businesses within the urban area. This asset class primarily includes rate-based expenditures and, as identified in the asset management plan, implementing the planned rate increases identified in the water and wastewater financial plan will allow for a robust water main replacement program. This, along with proactive operational programs, will make our system sustainable into the future. Staff continue to prioritize water assets due to the high level of risk associated with them. The condition table here assumes that the water wastewater financial plan is being followed. However, adjustments for affordability for COVID has led to less investment into water, thus the condition ratings are trending lower. The works proposed in this budget include the replacement of critical water mains that have experienced multiple breaks, colored water issues, or where the materials themselves have reached the end of their useful life. The wastewater distribution system conveys sewage from residential, commercial, and industrial properties within the urban boundaries to the regional trunk system and then on to the 2 treatment plants we have here in the city. After that, the waters are released into Lake Ontario. Priority sewer sections were identified through a citywide zoom camera inspection and evaluation project. The priority sewer sections have identified deficiencies with the potential for basement flooding. The proposed budget includes an allocation to address some of the top priority locations and conduct further CCTV inspections to more accurately identify potential concerns. Similar to water, it's critical to maintain the funding identified in the water and wastewater financial plan in order to maintain the current condition rating for this asset class. Stormwater. A majority of the storm sewer work is focused on the installation of new storm sewers, allowing for the separation of the stormwater away from the combined sewers or from infiltration into the sanitary system. This type of work assists in alleviating basement flooding, minimizes overflows to the environment, and increases capacity within our existing system. The proposed works also include the provision of CCTV inspections for parts of the storm sewer system to better identify concerns with regards to the condition of this drainage system. Storm sewer assets are tax-based expenditures, and as a result, existing funding levels may not be sustainable in the long term. Also, more than half of our annual budgets go toward new storm sewers as the city continues to work toward improving service to both protect and benefit the community and the environment. With respect to climate change, this capital budget includes approximately $10.7 million for projects that support climate change and environmental stewardship through projects that either improve or protect our natural assets and improve the efficiency of our facilities. Natural assets are important in providing a healthy, environmentally sustainable, and aesthetically pleasing city that enhances the quality of life and well-being of the community and is resilient to the impacts of climate change. Some of the natural assets currently owned, operated, and maintained by the City of St. Catharines include trees and forested areas, beds and planters, beehives, other horticultural assets, protected and unprotected coastal shorelines, watercourses, ponds, lakes, and wetlands. Applying asset management to natural assets is a new and emerging field. In this class, there are a few unknowns stemming from the fact that we don't always have reliable data on either condition or replacement values. If effectively managed, natural assets do not depreciate in the same manner as other constructed assets. Unlike most engineered assets, many natural assets actually increase in value as they mature. This in turn makes it difficult to assign replacement values and condition based on age and require regular, formal condition assessments. Facilities. City owns and operates a vast portfolio of facilities that support many services delivered by staff to our community. The city remains committed to ensuring that our facilities are safe and accessible for all members of our community, while also ensuring they meet the operational needs of the corporation. The proposed capital budget supports a work program that includes asset renewal and repair work to many of our facilities. We place a focus on maintaining the integrity of our life-saving systems, overall building envelope, and critical building components, as well as improving overall accessibility within these facilities. Proposed works also support the various council-approved strategic plans, such as the Sunset Beach Master Plan, the Arena Strategy, the Fire Master Plan, and the Conservation Demand Management Plan. And fire. Fire services is important for protecting the well-being of residents through the provision of preventative, safe, reliable, and accessible services. Fire vehicles and equipment are replaced based on the best practices, including those highlighted by the National Fire Protection Association, Canadian General Standards Board, and the Ontario Occupational Health and Safety Act. Equipment that are not regulated, such as watercrafts or the washroom trailer, are replaced when those assets reach the end of their useful life. Fire facilities are repaired and are replaced based on the recommendations from a building condition assessment. As the city continues to fund the replacement of our fire halls and emergency response vehicles, we should start to recognize some improvements in the condition rating of this asset. At this point, I'm going to pass it over to Phil Christie, our Director of Community, Recreation, and Culture Services. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. The next two slides will speak specifically to our play assets at our parks as well as our cultural assets. The city is committed to providing safe, reliable, affordable, accessible, inclusive, and sustainable parks and recreational spaces that reflect the city where everybody can play. The Parks Renewal Plan prioritizes asset renewal based on asset condition, as well as health and safety considerations, with the assets in the poorest condition being prioritized for replacement. Playground equipment and court renewal, as well as upgrades, are required to maintain service levels and ongoing safe play spaces. The chart that you see here on the slide reflects that Council's investment in the Park Renewal Plan has had a favorable impact on the overall asset and the condition of our assets throughout the city. Next slide, please. The Culture Plan implementation of recommendations will assist in achieving the goals of the forthcoming Culture Plan. Implementing a Culture Plan requires sustained investment to ensure its long-term success and impact. Funding supports ongoing programming, infrastructure development, capacity building initiatives, and evaluation processes that ensure the continued growth and effectiveness of cultural initiatives within the community. Exposure to harsh weather conditions, such as rain, snow, and UV rays, which leads to deterioration over time, is the main factor of asset condition for cultural assets. These assets are unique relative to other assets the city owns, as they are not traditional. Better understanding of these assets are required and will be incorporated in the future Culture Master Plan. I'll now pass it over to Richie Chung, Capital Planning Supervisor, to discuss the funding side of the program.
Thanks, Phil. So all the projects included in the 2024 to 2026 capital budget total $242 million, an average of $81 million per year. Consistent with prior years, we fund these expenditures from a variety of sources. Parks Legacy Fund and Canada Community Building Fund continues to provide an ongoing source of funding year over year. Average annual contribution is $4.5 million, and this equates to about 6% of the budget. Reserve contributions include development charges, community benefit charges, building reserve, Meridian Event Fund, Meridian Capital Reserve, Fleet Reserve, Mausoleum Reserve, and Green Initiative Reserves provide an average annual contribution of $8.3 million, or 10% of the budget. To highlight how growth is considered in our program, some projects that development charges are funding include the James Street Civic Space, Fire Station 3, Port Dalhousie Splash Pad, and Francis Creek Alignment to service growth around the CN Rail. Infrastructure levy, tax support, and water and wastewater rates and capital revenue total approximately $24 million, or 30% of the budget. with the balance of the funding coming from debt, which is providing 54% of the budget, or $44 million, which is decreasing compared to 60% from the prior year, as we're slowly recovering with the COVID-19 financial recovery plan. As a percentage of the total budget, the debt is going down. However, due to the increasing size of the capital programming, nominally it is increasing. This increasing need for debt will be managed prudently, which we'll discuss in the next few slides. Looking at our historical and future operating tax and rate supports to support capital reflects the city's flexibility to react to new information provided. The reduction in 21 and 22 reflects the realities of taxpayer affordability during the midst of the pandemic. 23 reflects the requirements to reset to an appropriate capital funding level to match pre-pandemic levels, including new information provided from the core asset management plan. And then 24 to 26 reflects the ongoing needs of the capital program to align both to the core and non-core asset management plans, growing inflationary pressures to maintain assets, and the council-approved COVID-19 financial recovery plan, which moved capital expenditures from 21 to 23, only to ramp up in 24 to 26. The debt funding of the city's capital expenditures is guided by the 3 key standards in the city's debt management strategy that are listed on the current slide. Of note, we'll continue to slowly normalize out of the capital out of revenue, which, as a reminder, is our down payment for debt-funded projects, which was reduced to 5% 2 years ago due to COVID, compared to the 10% policy. Last year, we increased this to 7.5%. For 2024, this will remain flat to consider taxpayer affordability. The return to policy has also been adjusted slower to consider the impacts that COVID had on taxpayer affordability. While the debt strategy caps debt charges at 10% of own source revenue, the current forecast reflects ratios above 10% in 2026 and after. Debt will play a critical role in line to the city's asset management plan. As identified in the previous slide, there was a funding gap in the capital program of $63 million to maintain existing level of service and $108 million to remove the backlog. A financial strategy will be forthcoming in 2025 as part of the Ontario legislation for municipalities to proceed down the path of asset management planning. As part of this strategy, a balancing act will be required to utilize debt as a tool to balance taxpayer affordability, level of service, and ensuring future populations can pay for utilization of the assets over the life of the asset. As we align to the asset management plan, more debt will be required. The ARL, or annual repayment limit, is a measure that the province imposes on municipalities for debt management, seen on the orange line. This graph shows the debt servicing costs in the lower gray blocks, and then also shows the council-imposed debt limit of 10% of own source revenues in blue. Looking at the current forecast shows the 26 debt ratio at 11.35%. This approval will be required again since it is above the 10% council limit, which was approved last year. Due to the increase of the AMP requirements in the forecasted debt servicing ratio, it's expected to peak around 14% in 2028 in order to afford the capital program of $81 million. Having said that, looking at the orange line, the city remains well within the provincial limit set at 25%. The debt limits will change as actual results are incorporated into the ratios. For conservativeness, we estimate interest rates at 6% for the forecast. Current interest rates are closer to 5%. In conclusion, the 2024 to 26 multi-year budget was developed with these 3 pillars in mind. The infrastructure program considers various items, including the need for growth to accommodate for a growing population and housing, the recommendations of the asset management plan, and the affordability of the taxpayer as part of the COVID-19 recovery plan. But Chair, that concludes the staff presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Messrs. Martuccio, Marotta, Christie, and Chung. And now we will take questions from council. Who do we have? Okay. Mayor Cisco.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the presenters. With respect to transportation, you identified $14.6 million in the capital budget for this year. Is it possible to put the PowerPoint back up on the screen and just cycle through, because these questions are related to the charts that were placed? So I'll wait for it to come up, but the transportation slide indicated a pretty serious degradation in our transportation infrastructure over, I think it's about a 23-year span. So I'm wondering if staff can comment, are we expecting increased federal or provincial dollars that would be able to backstop that degradation? I'm just wondering what the plan is, because transportation, and I want to say it's like slide 5 or 6, the transportation piece seems to be the the one which is, no, keep going. There we go. Transportation seems to be the thing that I would wager most taxpayers notice first and foremost. And that very poor portion of the graph starts to get bigger slowly and then very fast as the poor gets smaller because it's all becoming very poor. I'm just wondering if staff could comment on what the plan is to backstop that, because, I mean, residents are going to notice that.
Through you, Mr.
Director Patricia?
Yep. Through you, Mr. Budget Chair. Yeah, that is, the degradation of our transportation assets is something that obviously was highlighted through the development of our asset management plan, and is one of our assets that is performing, I guess, quite poorly. It is a result of, I guess, a lack of funding for regular maintenance. However, also many of the infrastructure assets are nearing end of life, if not at end of life. With regards to implementing a plan to address that, that is something we are hoping we can get a better grasp on as we move through the next phase of our asset management planning and the service levels associated with each asset class. We're hoping that through that process, we would be able to balance how our various assets are funded so that priority is put to the assets that are of most priority to the residents. With regards to external funding, there currently we have not identified any external funding to this at this time that would help us to address these assets. The other issue with our transportation assets is that the highest priority is put on our water, wastewater assets, as there is a higher level of risk associated with those, which drives our capital program. Therefore, when we are doing infrastructure such as water, wastewater, generally the associated road is also being addressed at the same time, which sometimes does not align with our assets that are most critical.
Okay, so as a follow-up question to that, it looks like 2026 is when we get to a point where half of our transportation assets are poor or very poor, and half of our assets are fair and above. How much additional funding to the transportation portfolio would be required for us to keep poor and below 50%?
Through you, Mr. Budget Chair, I don't have that answer for you right now. It's something that we could get back to you with. However, we would have to run the funding models and the scenarios in order to provide you with some accuracy to that question.
Okay, so maybe direction to staff. Can we have those numbers run so we can have a baseline for? I mean, I know I've seen the charts about how much money we would need to get fully caught up on our infrastructure backlog and the asset management plan, but just to keep our transportation assets at or below 50% fair or better, which, like I said, looks like it's 2026 when we cross over that threshold. I think that would be useful information for council to have. If we could flip to the next slide, bridges and culverts. Bridges and culverts seems to have a similar problem. It doesn't fall into the very poor category, which I think we would all appreciate given that bridges fall down if they're very poor, I think. I'm assuming we also don't have any analysis on how we would maintain better than 50% fair and above.
Through you, Mr. Budget Chair, we don't have that information at this time.
So if I could add that to the direction to staff, just to identify how much additional funding for bridges and culverts would be necessary to keep below that 50% number for poor and very poor. With respect to water, wastewater, stormwater, it's very comforting to see, and I'm glad to see that our assets are in very good condition. As you just mentioned, Mr. Director, they all have a very clear safety aspect, public safety aspect, so I'm comforted by the fact that they're in very good condition, and I applaud staff for the plan that was put forward a couple of years ago and that they have clearly been working through. I did have a few questions with respect to it. When it comes to stormwater separation, is that captured entirely under the stormwater bucket, or is that a combination of stormwater and wastewater?
Through you, Mr. Budget Chair, I believe the combined sewers are captured under the sanitary sewers.
Okay. So how much of the budget, which I guess between wastewater and stormwater is about $15.5 million, how much of that is separation of stormwater?
Director?
I made him open the book. I feel kind of guilty.
Through you, Mr. Budget Chair, I would ask that I get back to you with that information, if that's okay.
Okay, I'd appreciate that. Only a few more questions from me. I didn't have any questions with respect to the climate change piece. With respect to natural assets, if we could click forward to that, and I just took note that up to stormwater, everything was on like a 20 to 25 year horizon of asset classification. And then when we got to natural assets, it stops after 10. I'm just curious, is there a reason for that? Is it a matter of not being able to identify past 10 years what our assets classification would be?
Through you, Mr. Budget Chair. Like it was identified in the presentation, this is really an emerging field for us. So when we did the asset management plan, there was very limited information that was put in to come up with these charts. So we only predicted it so far. That's where we had our comfort level at the time. As we move through the various stages of the asset management plan, we hope to get more and better information. I believe the only information we had was with regards to our trees, as well as shoreline protection. But like I said, as we move to the next steps, we hope to be able to project further for this asset class. And as it was identified, it's very difficult to identify condition here because some natural assets improve in condition as they age, specifically trees. They provide more of a benefit to the community versus degradation. And more regular condition assessments is required versus theoretical models that would help you to determine condition moving forward.
Okay, so can I just ask, because you said something there which it seems a little bit off to me, is this measuring benefit to the community or is it measuring what shape they're in? Because you had mentioned, like, and I agree, trees over the course of time, a 1-year-old tree is not as beneficial to the community as a 10-year-old tree, but are we measuring benefit or are we measuring the health of the system?
This is through you, Mr. Budget Chair. This is measuring the health of the system. There are some natural assets, for example, our shoreline protection, which does degrade over time. And those types of assets would show up as poor or very poor if they're reaching that.
So in terms of the natural assets in the capital budget, I mean, is the majority of the dollars being spent on shoreline protection?
To you, Mr. Budget Chair, some of the budget is being shared, spent for shoreline protection, as well as water course rehabilitation work is identified in the capital budget. As well as some tree work.
Yep, okay. And then the only other, the next couple of slides all detailed, assets that are in good condition. The last one was just cultural assets that I had a question about. 0.1 million as compared to everything else in this capital budget is a very, very small amount. So I'm wondering if Mr. Christie could just comment on the fact that that is by far the smallest sliver that I could possibly imagine in the capital budget.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Mr. Mayor, correct. It's a fairly small amount. We've identified only a handful of projects that would qualify for capital replacement and or expenditures. So the biggest one being the relocation of the totem pole, which is just a placeholder right now because the feasibility study is still ongoing.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I really appreciate your points and questions about the the assets in terms of the 50%. I don't know if there is any kind of a guideline about 50% being a cutoff of being poor or very poor, but certainly one good way to look at it. I had made a similar note, not about combining poor and very poor, but I had noticed that most of the assets that are in the asset management plan at the end of the period, very poor, had increased significantly. So it is a concern for sure. Anyway, I believe Councillor Williamson was next. Councillor Williamson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just build off what the mayor was asking about with the transportation, basically roads. So from now, 2023, we have about 5% of the roads, if I'm understanding this right, in very poor condition. And by 2046, we're looking at 60% in very poor condition. I share the mayor's concern that this is quite problematic because not only is this going to be making motor vehicle transportation difficult, it's going to make people who ride bikes on the shoulder of the roads, because the shoulder of the roads tend to be the areas that are road and weather first. So this is, I guess it's not necessarily a question because the mayor's already asked it, but there's other issues that are related to it, not just about related to motoring throughout the city. So let's put it this way, Mr. Martuccio, am I correct in an assumption that the edges of the roads tend to be the first that become difficult for access?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, on roads that are not to the urban standard, yes, it's generally the edge of the roads that start to unravel first.
Thank you. Okay, and then a simple question, and I may have missed this in the 252 pages. We've done a really terrific job at Bill Burgoyne Arena updating the infrastructure inside of the building and providing equitable changing facilities and that kind of thing. I've been on the exterior. Is the exterior, my understanding is that has already been budgeted and that work is going forward. Am I correct in that assumption?
Through you, Mr. Budget Chair. Budgets were approved previously to do some work to the exterior Bill Burgoyne. However, there's additional funding, I believe, in the proposed budget due to construction or cost increase for construction included within the capital budget to help move that project forward.
Thank you. And I'm very happy to hear civil engineers talk about the value of trees. And in terms of the natural assets, like to me, having to put up armor stone on the shoreline isn't really a natural asset. That's just a defensive measure to prevent against years when we have rising waters and storms. So are we including shoreline protection as a natural asset?
Through you, Mr. Budget Chair, yes, we are including shoreline protection as a natural asset. As we move forward, we are looking at more natural ways of carrying out shoreline protection versus the hard armor stone treatments. There are some circumstances where hard armor stone treatments are required due to the severity of damage and wave action in those locations. However, we are looking at more natural ways of implementing shoreline protection moving forward.
I'm glad to hear that, but I still don't see it as a natural asset. In fact, it costs because the cost of transporting those massive boulders, there's a huge carbon footprint in doing that and quarrying them and all that kind of stuff. So to me, it's an anti-natural, whatever the correct terminology is. It kind of works against climate change. And then to the issue of the natural assets, which, like I said, I'm glad that it's in there, but until we actually include these in the budget, we do an accounting of the value of the urban forest, of the individual trees, and map them and inventory them and know where they are and what trees have significant value and which may have lesser value. and I know Mr. Martucci said we're moving in that. I hope we're moving, or I gather we're moving in that direction. And the only local good source of information that I know of for mapping the urban forest was Trio Code Niagara, and I see now that their website is offline, and that was an open source data where people submitted information based on by measuring the circumference of the trunks of trees and that kind of thing. So I think we have ways to move forward in defining what natural assets are, and then actually including them as items in the budget, which they should be because of the proven benefits that we know about them in terms of slowing down runoff and all. I won't go through the whole list, but in order to, include them, they need to we need to calculate the environmental benefit of them and have them itemized in the budget. So I'll leave it at that. But I continue to monitor what we're doing in terms of actually assessing natural assets in a way that reflects the true benefit that they have to the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson. And I will now move to Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Chair. In regards to transportation, when you did your findings in regards to the condition of our roads and streets, as far as the region roads are concerned, I'm sure they're not included in the findings that were given to us. Are they in a similar condition? Do you know? Are we working in partnership with them as far as repairing? Will they be repairing theirs? I mean, I think of Niagara Street, which is in very poor shape. Obviously, they're doing Ontario Street now. Hopefully, it'll be done by the time the rowers show up. But anyways, the regional roads, what kind of condition are they in? And are they going to be as diligent in fixing them as we are going to be fixing ours?
Through you, Mr. Budget Chair, I can't comment on the specific condition of the roads there. I suspect their conditions are very similar to ours. From our discussions with our counterparts at the region, they face very similar challenges to what we do with regards to being able to fund those assets because of the risk associated with them. Generally, much of their funding goes to fund their water, wastewater infrastructure as well. So identifying funds for roads is sometimes a challenge, and it's something that we have heard from our regional counterparts as well.
Are they doing a similar research as far as the condition of the roads in St. Catharines, do you know?
Through you, Mr. Budget Chair, we have recently been talking with the region about carrying out how we carry out our condition assessments and how we could align that with the way that the region carries out theirs. We are trying to align our approaches to identifying condition of roads, and they are working through their asset management plans similar to what we are doing.
Thank you. Hopefully they get the same effort as you put forth. I think you've done a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips, and I will now go to Councillor Lindell.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to city staff. Just a question about that the basketball courts are being redone and the park equipment is being replaced. Are there any plans to revamp, repair, or replace the baseball diamond?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Councillor, we are hopeful that we are able to do a feasibility study for our sports fields. We haven't been able to do that, and we were able to proceed with our play assets because we were able to establish condition assessments. We haven't been able to do that for our sports fields, so that's what we're waiting on before we proceed with diamond repairs.
Thank you, Councillor Lindell. Are there any other questions of staff? If not, oh, sorry, I just saw Councillor Kushner has his hand up. Councillor Kushner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I find the absolute numbers to be interesting, but I would question how our residents react to them because they're all in millions of dollars. And I think would also be interesting to indicate what the percentage increases are, because then they can reflect on how the capital assets will affect the operating budget. So can that be readily done?
Direction to staff, would that be okay, Director? Yes, Director Douglas says that could be done.
Okay, I would appreciate that, Mr. Mayor, and I'm sure, Mr. Chair, and I'm sure residents would be able to relate to a percentage rather than the absolute number. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kushner. Any other questions?
And yeah, one more, Mr.
Sorry?
Chair.
Yes?
And it's a question I ask all the time. How does our infrastructure compare to that of other municipalities?
Director Martuscio?
Through you, Mr. Budget Chair, I think we're in very similar state to other municipalities. Most municipalities across Ontario have challenges in addressing their infrastructure needs, and it was quite evident in the development of our asset management plans, and it's quite evident in many of the discussions that we have with our counterparts at other regions and municipalities.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Okay, are there any other questions? Seeing none, I'll just make a couple of comments. I think most of the good questions have been asked. I just wanted to make two comments. One, that I'm so glad to see the taxpayer affordability show up in so many of the slides. It's important to have that emphasis there. And secondly, from the chart that Mr. Chung showed in terms of debt ratios, I continue to be concerned about us exceeding that 10% ratio in the future, but it's something that we can discuss at another time, but I certainly would be concerned about that. Councilor Kushner, did you have your hand up again?
No, that's fine, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
I do have a question with respect to the library.
Okay. Can I have a mover for the recommendation and the report? Councilor Stevens, and a seconder, Councilor Ratliff. Okay, so you see the recommendation up there. So any other comments or questions on that recommendation? Again, it's just being for information only. As I said at the beginning, we're not approving budgets today. So, okay, so I'll look at the Deputy Clerk to take the roll.
Councillor Stevens.
Yes.
Councillor Ratzlaff.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor McPherson.
Yes.
Councillor Lindell.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Mayor Cisco.
In favor.
And Chair Garcia.
Yes.
And that's carried.
Thank you. So we will now move to 8.2, Financial Management Services Director, and the 2024-2026 multi-year staff proposed water and wastewater budget and associated rates. I now call upon Mark Green, Manager of Environmental Services, Daryl Smith, Director of Municipal Works, and Lucia Chen, Manager of Financial Planning, to provide a presentation regarding the 2024 multi-year staff proposed water and wastewater budget and associated rates. Mr. Green.
Thank you. Yeah, good evening, Budget Chair, Mayor, and Council. My name is Mark Green. I'm happy to be here tonight to talk to you about the 2024 to 2026 multi-year staff proposed water and wastewater budget. So thank you very much. So as we all know, water is essential for life. It's very important, and the city is committed to ensuring a consistent supply of safe, high-quality drinking water for the community. We have a large municipal system. We have over 600 kilometers of water mains. We have over 42,000 customers, well over 42,000 customers that rely on water every day. And the revenue from the rates goes to pay for 3 essential services. So first is the delivery of clean, safe drinking water. Second is to treat the wastewater before it's released back into the environment. And third is for the infrastructure and maintenance of the city's water and wastewater systems. When it comes to these systems, there's a shared responsibility. So first, the water is treated by the region at the DeQ water treatment plant. It then goes through some large transmission mains. Then to the city's water mains, those 600 that goes to all the residents in the city. And then the last part is privately owned, so the service and then the private plumbing is owned by the residents or businesses. On the wastewater side, it's just a mirror image of that. So, you know, the private plumbing to the city sewers, ultimately to the wastewater treatment plants, where it's treated before going back into the environment, which in our case is into Lake Ontario. When it comes to the proposed water and wastewater budget, so this is the first time we've had a multi-year budget being proposed. So it includes setting rates for 2024, 2025, and 2026. It does provide us that opportunity to balance ratepayer affordability with long-term financial sustainability of these systems. And the funding is required for including the regional costs, the cost to treat the water and wastewater, capital infrastructure, so renewing and replacing water mains and sewers, for example, and the operational expenses to run these systems. When the budget was being prepared, it heavily relied on the city's approved financial plan. So in 2019, council approved a water wastewater financial plan that was required under the Safe Drinking Water Act. So when we're talking about our assets, you know, they're obviously very expensive. I think the chair said millions. Now, you know, we're certainly talking in billions. They're worth $7.2 billion in terms of replacement value. And the water and wastewater system is 46% of that. So this is a big chunk of all of our assets. Water is about 19% and wastewater is about 27%. And then that other 54% is roads, bridges, you know, arenas, buildings, all of our other assets. So it's very large. And looking at the pie chart on the right there, a big chunk of the costs incurred are what we call fixed. So we are incurring those costs no matter what, and that other 35%, that's variable and depends on the usage of water, wastewater. So when we're building the budget, there definitely were a number of highlights and challenges and budget pressures. So we're highlighting kind of a number of them here. So the first is in the peak of the COVID pandemic, there were some cost-saving measures and some of the investments in these systems were deferred. And the funding levels were reduced below what was approved in now's financial plans. Now there's kind of pressure to kind of make up that gap and get back to that level of funding. The second thing is funding for our water and wastewater infrastructure. As we just heard, we have large infrastructure deficits, so trying to reduce those over time. The third is climate change and how that affects water consumption. So an example of that is actually this year we had a really wet summer. Probably anyone who has a pool or can attest to that. So a lot of people reduced their outdoor lawn watering and things like that. So as a result of that, revenues are down because people are using less water. So that then puts pressure on the city's reserves, which fund those. So that's a challenge going forward. There's also legislative requirements on operational challenges, and you'll hear a little bit more about that later. And in addition, regional cost increases. So the regions set their budget, so those costs are coming too. So all those have to be factored in. So given these challenges, how do we get back onto a path to sustainability? So the water wastewater financial plan identified those spending increases to kind of reduce that infrastructure deficit. And it included kind of annual increases of no more than 6.5% on households. So if you look at the left side, the green is the rates that were identified in that water wastewater financial plan over time. The blue is the historical spending. So you can see in the last couple of years, the spending levels are below, in some cases well below what initially was called for in that financial plan. So in the proposed budget and the next 3 years, there are some increases to try and balance that out. So at the end of that 6-year period, the funding's there as was identified in that financial plan to kind of close that gap. That modified spending plan was also reflected in the city's asset management plan that was approved by council in 2021 for the core assets. Should also note the 10-year financial plan is actually coming up for renewal. So in 2024, that'll be coming back before council for that next 10-year period. So the last thought I will leave you with is related to kind of climate change. Climate change obviously is long-term projections in St. Catharines, and in our climate adaptation plan, one of the things was identified as the biggest risk was these extreme weather events, and specifically their relationship to kind of basement flooding. The investments in the wastewater infrastructure will help kind of make the city more resilient to these in the future. And so that's another key focus for the water wastewater rates. So at this time, I will turn it over to Director Smith, who will provide some additional details on some of the budget pressures related to the legislative and operational challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. So as council is aware, the city's management of our water and wastewater systems comes under a license from the province. This is highly regulated, and those regulations are subject to change. Previously, staff have brought forward council reports on the financial and operational impacts of legislated changes such as Bill 23 or the new sewer licensing model that the province has put in place. And to go through all those impacts now would take far too long. But I would like to give a couple of examples to help council and the members of the public have a better understanding of why this has such an impact on our service delivery and our budget. So the first example I would like to use is the excess soil management regulation. So previously, before this regulation came into place, when we went out and repaired a water main or repaired a sewer or dug a ditch, that material was brought back either to the Lake Street Service Center or the Meriton Yard, where it was placed, stored, and eventually it would be reused throughout the city. Under the new regulation, that material now has to be tracked from its source. It has to be kept separate from all other sources. It has to be tested for contaminants, and any material that doesn't pass the testing has to be disposed of at a landfill. So all of that, the testing, the sorting, the tracking, adds cost to our day-to-day operation, and there is no apparent benefit in either an increased service level or just in a general benefit to the public, even though that cost is added. The second example I'd like to talk about is Bill 23, and I know that that has been discussed a lot in this council chambers, but I want to talk about it from the major impact it had on our water and wastewater systems. And that has been the need to switch our approach from a state of good repair for our water and wastewater systems to providing additional capacity throughout the system to allow development and growth. So to better understand this impact, I want to use an analogy. So think that you have a small 4-cylinder truck that you use for your job. You go to work and they ask you to haul a lawnmower from place to place, and you use the truck to do that, and the truck works fine for that. And as a responsible vehicle owner, you do all the maintenance costs, you have the oil changes, you may have some small breakdowns over time, but eventually that truck is going to do the job for a long, long time, and you will get the maximum life out of it before you replace it. Now think one day you go into work with that little truck and to haul that little lawnmower, and your boss says now, well, I don't want you to haul the lawnmower anymore. I want you to haul a big trailer home with a boat attached to it. So that's a job that truck was never designed to do. It's going to struggle, it's going to break down, it's going to cause repairs. So over and above all those maintenance costs that you had before, you have all these new costs associated with it. And even if the truck is working properly, it's struggling to do the job that it was never designed to do. And before long, you realize, listen, I got to get a new truck with a more powerful engine that's more capable if I'm going to be able to continue to do this work. And that's the position that the city is in when we start constructing large, intense developments and we're connecting them to 100-year-old infrastructure that was never designed or constructed to do that work. This is why you're seeing the need for so many upgrades to our infrastructure system. Next slide, please. From 2019 to 2023, to date in 2023, we've had approximately 392 water main breaks. So we're averaging about 100 water main breaks a year. And as you can see from the map that's shown on the screen, these water breaks are distributed across the city and not concentrated in any one section. Capital construction projects replacing older water mains are helping, but there's still a ways to go. Operationally, we still face sewer infiltration, and that's rain or stormwater getting into our sewers. And we still have water loss in our water distribution system, and that's from fighting fires or water main breaks. And to date, we have undertaken some projects that have helped with that, to both reduce infiltration and water loss. However, a resilient, proactive maintenance program is required. To date, while we remain largely reactive in our programs, we have been able to make some small inroads into proactive maintenance, such as our water main and hydrant flushing program. That helps with ensuring that our hydrants and valves are working properly, among other benefits from the flushing program. And we will continue to try to find ways to become more proactive throughout our current work program. I will now turn it over to Lucia Chen, Manager of Financial Planning.
Thank you, Daryl. Before we dive into the city's water wastewater budget, we would like to first take a look at the regional cost based on the shared responsibility, as Mark alluded earlier in the presentation. Regional Council approved the region's 2023 water and wastewater financial plan last month in October. The financial plan stipulates a total annual increase of 7.15% for 10 years. And they approved their 2024 water wastewater budget on November 16th with an overall budget increase of 7.95%. The associated increases have been reflected in the staff proposed water wastewater budget for the city. The regional controlled cost in the city's water budget is around 43% and 66% in the wastewater budget. With the water and wastewater combined, the regional control cost is approximately 56%, and the city control cost is around 44%. As the city continues with the COVID-19 financial recovery and investment to the city's water wastewater capital infrastructure, the cost split between the city and the region is projected to slowly shift as the city's cost share increases in the next 3 years. Staff have received some questions from the community regarding the water bill increase. One specific question was, how come I'm paying more when I'm using less water? So we would like to take this opportunity to address this question. The two graphs here reflect what is the main driver of the bill increase going into the future. On the left donut, it shows the percentage breakdown of expenditures between variable and fixed on the budget. And on the right donut, it shows how these costs are recovered through the current water billings. Notice the variable percentage recovery is higher on the right. The impact of this discrepancy between expenditures and revenue drives the bill higher, as the city's cost of maintaining the water and wastewater system will need to be recovered regardless of consumption value. Now let's take a look at the staff proposed water wastewater rates for the city. For 2024 to 26, staff are proposing increase to both the water and wastewater rates that will become effective on March 1st each year. And the next slide breaks the rates down for an average household in the city. The annual estimated increase for 2024 is $102.06, or 9.9%. For 2025 is $109.67, or 9.7%. For 2026 is $121.28, or 9.8%. In 2024, the proposed rate increase will represent $8.50 per month, $1.96 per week, or 28 cents per day. While the proposed 3-year increases might seem significant, staff would like to provide some background information to help everyone understand the rationale. The city's 2019 10-year water wastewater financial plan provided increased spending to address ongoing infrastructure deficits and include annual increase of no more than 6.5% on the typical residential household bill. However, the city's water wastewater annual bill increases in 2019 to 2022 were below the targets, especially during COVID-19 in 2021 and 22 budget, to reduce the financial burden on ratepayers. In alignment with the city's COVID-19 financial recovery plan, it is necessary for the city to continue to reduce the existing funding gaps in order to move forward, achieving a sustainable level of capital spending. The staff proposed 2024 to 2026 water wastewater rates will assist the city in making progress on this goal in the next 3 years, and also help address inflation and global supply chain challenges that may have a budget impact on expenditures required to support the program delivery. Looking at how the city's 2024 average water bill measures up with our 9 municipal comparators, as you can see from the chart, St. Catharines 2023 rates were below the average. The proposed 24 rates are above the average of all the comparators, and that is because the rates displayed for most of the comparators are the most current rates available, which is 2023. Staff are anticipating increases for the comparators in their 2024 rates. Now switching to how the city's bills compare across the region, 7 of 8 Niagara comparators are showing 2023 approved rates. As you can see, St. Catharines proposed 2024 water wastewater rates are still below the average. Looking at the proposed rates in a different way, residents can either pay 8 cents to drink 12 liters of water, or go to the grocery store and spend $4.35 for the same amount of water. With the proposed 2024 rates for $1.81 less, residents can not only drink the same amount of water, but they can also take a shower, do a load of laundry, run a dishwasher, and bathe the kids. Staff have been reviewing this over the years. 5 years ago, the amounts on the two sides used to equal. Back in February, when staff presented the 2023 water wastewater budget, we told council that it was $1.69 less to use the city water, and at this time, doing the same activities, you will be saving $1.81. So the cost benefits of using municipal water is increasing, which means potentially the bottled water price increase is is more than the city rate increase. This shows that there's great value to pay for using city water and maintaining the city's water wastewater system for many years to come. Mr. Chair, that concludes staff presentation tonight for the water wastewater budget.
Thank you, Lucia. So, okay. Are there any questions from staff? Oh. Who was? Oh. Okay. Mayor Cisco.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the presenters. And I'm hoping we can put the presentation back up because I am going to reference some of the stuff that's on the screen. My first question, I guess, to Ms. Chen, and for clarity. So the increase that we're proposing this year is 9.9%. There she is. Wonderful. That's inclusive of the region's 7.95%, correct?
Through the chair, that is correct. Yeah.
Okay, and I think that's important for the community to hear. The region has recently passed a 7.95% increase. The city is really only adding 2% on top of that for all of the parts of the system that we deal with as well, and I just want to make sure that that's out there. And I realize that's an oversimplification perhaps, but ultimately that's where we're at. I'm hoping we go to slide 12. This is something that I've been hammering away at now for probably as long as I've been on council, but I think it's important, and if there are any intrepid reporters out there who are writing a story about this particular issue this evening, I do hope that they fixate on this one. It's important, and it's a thing that it took me a long time to completely understand, but the idea that even though the costs within our system are largely fixed, and really are not particularly dependent on the amount of water that's used. We're talking about pipes in the ground that need to be replaced and maintained and everything else. That's not how we actually charge for water and wastewater. And so it creates this system where you do get residents complaining on a regular basis. Well, I'm using less and less water. I'm not seeing a reduction in my bills. And I will say, and perhaps, Chair, this is more a comment than a question, but I'll put a question mark at the end of it. We've sold people on the idea that conservation of water will save them money, and we've done that for a very long time, and it's a fundamental mistake. It's not true. The pipes in the ground are the pipes in the ground, and the pipes in the ground are what get the water to us and get the wastewater away from us, and those don't change, and the costs associated with them only go up and don't really depend on the amount of water that's actually drank. So I think it's important for all of us as councilors to make sure that we're communicating appropriately to the public that even though we charge on a system which is primarily variable, with only about a third of it being the fixed cost, the system doesn't operate like that. And if it's one thing that I hope the community understands coming through this budget process for water and wastewater, it's that the vast majority of these costs are fixed and they have to be recovered regardless of how much water is actually used within the system. Because if we don't keep the pipes in working order, then the water won't be clean. And it won't get to where we want it to go, and it will leak out of the system because we're not doing proper maintenance. I think it's important for people to understand that. If we could go to slide 18, that was the last point, and it's because this is the first time, I will admit, I make fun of this slide every single year during the water wastewater budget. I make fun of Ms. Douglas every single year, but Ms. Chen said something different this time, and I hope everybody caught it. When this was first started, the costs were the same. Is that correct? Who should I direct this to, Chair? Should this be Ms. Chen or Ms. Douglas?
Through the chair, I can confirm that's correct.
And what year was that in? When was the last year when those two numbers at the bottom of the screen were the same?
Through the chair, when staff reviewed the history, we went back 5 years back to 2019, and the bottom two figures were $1.99.
So $1.99 for the total cost of city water and $1.99 for the total cost of bottled water. In that time, have we changed the metrics that we're using to calculate the city water cost? Like, it's the same length of a shower, it's the same load of laundry, it's the same dishwasher, it's the same bath for the kids?
Through the chair, that is correct. We use the same consumption value to calculate those costs.
Okay, well then I will say that for the first time, and no offense intended to Ms. Douglas, but for the first time, I think this is a highly instructive slide because it demonstrates that in the last 5 years, the city has managed to maintain their costs as best as can be expected, given a high inflation environment and massive increases in the cost of construction. And private industry has more than doubled the cost of the smaller volume of water. And that's why I think that this is really instructive, and I hope this is a take-home that people can identify as well. We've seen water rates go up over the last couple of years. I was a part of the council that passed the plan that indicated 6% a year, and it was a very large increase comparatively, but it was sold to us, and I think rightfully so, as being absolutely necessary. And we saw the water, wastewater, asset management slides in the first presentation this evening, and the fact that our system is in very good shape. But I think this slide right here shows just how good a shape we are fiscally as well, in that we are seeing increases, but those increases are absolutely necessary to make sure that we can continue to offer high-quality drinking water and high-quality water services, both water and wastewater, as well as separate out stormwater, which is not just a good fiscally and financially for the community, it's a good from a climate change perspective. We're able to do all that and contain costs significantly better than the private sector has, because the same volume of water that they were selling, which amounts to 12 liters total of water, has more than doubled in price in the last 5 years. And we've seen a significantly smaller increase in the cost to residents of our community. So I will leave it at that, Chair, but I do want to applaud the folks here at City Hall who work in the water and wastewater when it comes to asset management, when it comes to maintaining our system, when it comes to everything throughout. When it comes to dealing with the downloaded costs, which we then have to pass on from the region to our residents, I want to give kudos to those staff that are involved with that, because I can only imagine how much fun it is.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some good points. I would just ask, I don't myself buy water too often. I try to use tap water. But my question through you to Ms. Chen would be, is 435 a valid number? Like, from what I hear from my wife when we have to buy water, I thought you look for sales and it's a lot less than that, but I could be wrong.
Through the chair, so when staff prepared the budget and presentation for the report, or present the budget to council, you're right. There's some variable about the statistics, but we staff try to avoid the obtain the price that's just regular price. So that's been consistent year over year, because we don't think it's accurate to use the price that's on sale from the flyer. We would just use a regular price that's not on sale.
Okay, thank you. So I will now go to Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Chair. I'll direct this to Director Smith. Quite concerning it. If I have a water main break in front of my house, you dig up the dirt. Correct me if I'm wrong in any of this. You have to now haul the dirt away to Lake Street and replace it with clean dirt. And then once you get that dirt to Lake Street, then you have to do an assessment as to whether that is contaminated or not. A couple of questions on that, if I'm correct in what I understood you to say. Number one, do we have staff that will evaluate that dirt that you take back, or do we have to hire another company to do that? And secondly, you've got 100 water main breaks a year. How much do you anticipate is that going to cost you extra on your operating budget in order to do that 100 times?
Director Smith?
Through you, Mr. Chair. I'll tackle the second question first. So if you don't mind, I will circulate, I will pull the numbers out of the budget that we've set aside for this, and I'll circulate that. The second, or the first part of the question is, yes, we have to use it's called a qualified person under the regulation, which means using a geotechnical firm to do the work. Now, we have partnered with the FES on their capital projects. We use the same firm on our operational projects to try to minimize cost and get the best deal that we can get for the city. But there is an additional cost every single to that material as it comes out of the ground.
So you don't know how much right now, you don't know how much per break it's going to be of an increase on your budget. And you know, like the mayor just, and thanks for saying this, Mr. Mayor, that our increase is only 2%. Well, this is going to be part of that 2%. That's going to me, really dig into that, because this is going to be really expensive.
Through you, Mr. Chair, like I said, I will bring the number forward. Because of once the initial cost, which was dealt with in 2023, was setting up the yard to actually have separate areas where we could store and sort the material, and that cost was in the 2023 budget. The ongoing costs of tracking, once the system is in place, it is a marginal cost, but it's not going to be like adding 10% to each dig. It's going to be spread out over the entire year.
Okay, it'll be interesting to see how much that is. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As follow-up on the excess soil management piece that Councillor Phillips was just, or Deputy Mayor Phillips was just talking about, there are occasions where we have to implement new measures to safeguard the public and protect the environment, and sometimes maybe we introduce processes that might be just a little bit over the top and too much. I just wonder if through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Director Smith, sorry, explain how we handled it in the past. I mean, I take it we knew where there was contaminated soil and we would deal with it responsibly. I just wonder if you could explain the process that was in place before this new legislation came in.
Director Smith.
Through you, Mr. Chair. And so previously, yes, we did know areas of the city where we could expect levels of contamination, and we would deal with that soil differently. But we were not required to track it. We were not required to separate it. We were not required to dispose of it in a landfill. The regulation that's come in place requires us now to track every single source material, to put that source material in a separate storage location until it's tested. And then once it's tested, depending on the results of the test, we can either reuse it throughout the city or we have to dispose of it at a landfill. So that is a direct result of the regulation, and it's regardless of whether we know or have a high level of confidence in whether that soil is contaminated or not. So in theory, even soil coming out of a park, when we do tree planting in a park, is supposed to follow that same regulation.
Thank you. And did the Doug Ford provincial government provide commensurate funding to cover those additional costs that the city is now having to cover?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there was no additional funding from the province.
Thank you. And then a specific question in terms of the infiltration into the water system, how do we go about identifying where, to me, this would be something that's kind of tricky to do, and how big of a problem is the infiltration situation?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I guess the significance of the problem at this point is unknown. So what we've included in the budget this year is to initiate a full CCTV program, which will do closed circuit television inspection of all our storm sewers over a 5-year period. Or sorry, all our sewers over a 5-year period. We have, based on our experience, identified the high risk areas at present, which we will CCTV in the first year, and that will help us identify the basis of the problem. We have placed some funds within the budget to allow for repairs because we know from previous experience and the experience of other municipalities, once you start this program, you tend to identify problems that you have to address. So unfortunately, the short answer is we don't know how big the problem is at this particular time.
Thank you. And then, Mr. Chair, through you to CAO, we know that the last budget, about a third of it, or 3 points of it at least, were 3% of it, were due to Bill 23 and these downloading of costs from the provincial government. And how are we going to communicate that to the public, where these additional costs are coming from? Do we have any kind of a thought process in place as to pinning the tail on the donkey kind of thing here to identify where these costs are actually coming from, additional costs that we have to pass on to local taxpayers?
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question, Councillor. There's a few things, and Council would when we had the strategic plan session, and you'll see it in the operating budget as well, there's the section that we define as legislative sort of portions of our budget are effectively both provincial, federal legislation as well as our own policies that we put in place. There's been a lot of discussion around the big city mayors table that we're a member of, and we have a CAO working group that's looking at trying to standardize the language in our budgets that can specifically identify the levy impacted legislation and having some common terminology across all municipalities that can better identify what are the costs associated with various regulations that have direct impacts on operating budgets. So it's a bit of a work in progress at this point, but we have identified it, and we're trying to pull out a lot of that information that you're requesting so the public can be better informed as to what we have direct control over. For instance, the levels of service that we want to provide in recreation facilities, as opposed to the costs that we do not necessarily have a lot of control over, which are the legislative regulations that are put in place, whether it be the provincial government or the federal government, or for that matter, other areas of regional control that we don't have direct say over. So a bit of a work in progress, long answer, but we are trying to standardize that terminology so the public's better informed as to what we can in fact control at the municipal level.
Yeah, I agree. We definitely need to have some plain language to get the message across. And just one last thing, I'd like to reiterate the mayor's comments on in terms of the service that Public Works provide when we have water breaks. We really react quickly and do a great job. And more water main breaks, it's going to really cause greater aggravation for both residents and for our staff. But boy, we do a really good job in providing the service, and kudos to the frontline workers who do that work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson, and thank you, CAO Oaks, for that explanation. And I believe the number that we saw in the strat plan review was something like 77% is now legislated component. Okay. Any other questions from council? I see Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. I think staff did a really good job on this. Could we not, so that's my question, we get hung up on percent numbers all the time, but sometimes the percent isn't a big dollar amount. So when we talk to the public and our residents, I think we need to let them know both numbers, because sometimes a 7 or 9% increase might only be, when you break it down to the water, it was pennies. So I think we need to make sure that our residents know that it could be I'm just throwing numbers out there, $100,000 increase, but it's 8%, and they just need to know the difference, because sometimes the number will be high, the percent is low. Sometimes the percent is high, but the dollar figure is really low. So we need to make sure that the public knows that. Like the picture with the water, case of water, you know, is brilliant on that kind of stuff too.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens.
So I was just
Good
wondering if we
point.
can do that, so
I
somehow.
will ask Director Douglas if she wants to comment on that, but I would, that's one point I wanted to make is that obviously we're looking at, on a percentage basis, historically high increases. So it is particularly important this year that we have some very good explanations out there. And last year we worked on sending information out with the water bills, and I strongly suggest we should do that again. Director Douglas, any thoughts? Or?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. And we do have the insert that goes into the water bill each year, and we did do a revamp of that last year to refresh it, and we'll continue to do that this year, especially with multi-year budgets and explaining some of these, and as much as possible show both dollars and percentages so that there is that balanced approach for the residents.
Thank you, Director. Are there any other questions from Council? If not, I will just ask one question to Director Smith, following up on one of Councilor Williamson's questions. That program, 5-year program of using closed-circuit TV cameras sounds like a pretty expensive proposition. Is that in the current budget now, or?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we have, or to the chair, yes, we have included that in the budget.
Okay, thank you. Okay, can I get a councilor to move the recommendation in the report? Councilor Phillips, and a seconder, Mayor Cisco. Okay, so you see the recommendation on the screen, and it's essentially for information, so I will ask the Deputy Clerk to call a recorded vote.
Councillor Phillips?
Yes.
Councillor Ratzlaff?
Yes.
Councillor Stevens?
Yes.
Councillor Williamson?
Yes.
Councillor Dodge?
Yes.
Councillor Kushner?
Yes.
Councillor Lindell?
Yes.
Councillor McPherson?
Yes.
Councillor Miller?
In favor?
Mayor Cisco?
Aye.
And Chair Garcia.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. That's carried. So we will move to 8.3, Financial Management Services Director, 2024 multi-year staff proposed operating budget. And now I call upon Christine Douglas, Director of Financial Management Services and City Treasurer, and Aaron Ahosky, Deputy Chief Administrative Officer, to provide a presentation regarding the 2024-2026 multi-year staff proposed operating budget.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor, councillors, and citizens and senior staff. Tonight, the Deputy CAO and I are pleased to present the staff's 2024 to 2026 proposed multi-year operating budget. I appreciate that you have heard from the CAO about the city's budget process and how it has been altered under the new legislation, with the budget being deemed adopted as the final step. And we also appreciate that it's been a long evening with presentations, so we will do our best to be brief and concise in our final presentation of the evening. Next slide, please. So similar yet different from past couple of years, the city's operating budget continues to be impacted by external pressures and initiatives. The significant items have been highlighted for you in Appendix 3 of FMS Report 175-2023 in your council package. I will share a few of these highlights and pressures for you. From the legislative perspective, provincial legislation and changes continue to create pressure on the city's operating budget. There have been numerous discussions in this chamber, and we've heard them even this evening, of the impacts of Bill 109 and 23, with the loss of revenue and legislative timelines. There's also new provincial regulations related to the regulatory compliance for the city's storm water management systems and the continued reduction of the Ontario Municipal Partnership funding support from the province. Estimated impact of these changes range from $963,000 in 2024 to $410,000 in 2026, although the full impacts of Bill 23 are uncertain until these regulations are released. There are also inflationary and non-discretionary pressures. These pressures relate to nationwide economic inflation, resulting in the city experiencing increasing costs for contracted services, fuel, and materials. Inflation is also triggering increases in many service contracts and software license fees. Forecasted operational impacts related to inflation and non-discretionary items are $1.43 million in 2024 and $850,000 in 2026. Health and safety, aging infrastructure, the opioid crisis, mental health crisis, homelessness, safe spaces for all, and increased need for security at city facilities have added pressures to the city's budget as well. You have heard already this evening from Anthony, Tim, and Richie on the city's asset management needs, with the operating budget being the funding for approximately 17% of the city's capital program. The increased needs for asset renewal and replacement also correlates to pressure on the operating budget, which equates to $733,000 in 2024 and $210,000 in 2026. Council priorities and initiatives. In a few minutes, you'll hear from Deputy CAO Ohosky, who will share some of the information on the city's strategic plan refresh and preliminary results. When staff built the budget, we took a balanced approach to making sure that projects and initiatives align with council's strategic priorities and are included in the multi-year budget. Some of these initiatives include a corporate-wide diversity, equity, and inclusion, support for community events and celebrations, the new older homeowner tax increase deferral program, supporting events and celebrations, the modernization of talent acquisition, updating the city's recreation master plan and strategic partnership for our recreational assets with Meridian Center and the Canada Games Park, new assets additions such as splash pads, and support for existing key assets such as city beaches, and the introduction of social procurement with various memberships and diverse supplier organizations. The city's parking operations continue to be one of the most significant operational areas impacted by COVID-19. As entities embrace hybrid and remote working options for their work groups, the lower demand for parking has caused a considerable negative impact on the financial sustainability of the city's parking operations. While staff continued looking at opportunities to address the long-term sustainability of parking operations, this work is ongoing and at this time, and therefore tax levy support is continued to be required for the next 3 years, as estimated at $970,000 with an increase of $690,000 in 2024. There are also some opportunities that add to the financial pressures in the 2024 to 2026 multi-year budget. In 2021, Council approved the policy to reduce reliance on the Civic Project Fund, which is a good step towards financial sustainability. This change was implemented in the 2023 budget, and by the end of the city's first multi-year budget, there will be no increases. There will be no reliance on the Civic Project Fund in the operating budget for recurring budget items. This strategy assists the city to move forward with its long-term perspective of improved financial independence. However, during this transition period, these expenditures need to be funded by the tax levy and included in the operating budget. Another decision made by Council in 2021 was the reduction of the city's capital out of revenue from 5% to 5% from 10% rate, which differs from our debt management strategy. And this was provided much needed taxpayer relief in the 2021 and 2022 budgets. To get the city back on course to the 10% strategy, we have been working towards gradually increasing the capital out of revenue. With the impact of inflation and the economy taking longer to recover in various sectors, staff are recommending extending the time period to return the capital out of revenue to its pre-pandemic level of 10% by a further 3 years. This provides balance between financial recovery and supporting taxpayer affordability. Continue to focus on the positive. There are opportunities to mitigate budget impacts in the 2024 to 2026 multi-year operating budget. There is revenue generation. The most significant is related to investment income. The current interest rate environment has increased investment income in 2022 and 2023, and the trend in the 2024 is expected to continue for our investment income. Although there is expected to be a decline in this revenue source in 25 and 2026 as interest rates return to more historic levels. There is also increase in fire dispatch revenues in each of the next 3 years due to the expansion of the communication services with our partners in the province. Positive revenue generation is also expected in 25 and 26, with the development returning to more normal levels. The introduction of the municipal accommodation tax has also created a new revenue stream for the city. These revenues support targeted initiatives without having a net impact on the city's tax levy, and they create the indirect benefit of enabling the city to support initiatives such as the 2024 World Rowing Championships and the Women's World Golf Championship. An impact of revenue generation in 2024 is an increase of $1.65 million, with a smaller increase in 2025 and 2026 having a slight decline. Council also heard from Ernst & Young through the 2019 Audit and Accountability Report that one of the findings was the comparatively low staffing levels relative to services offered by the city. Through the development of the people strategy, Ernst & Young also recommended the core service review to ensure that our service levels are sustainable over the long term with provided resources. The core service review was funded in the 2023 operating budget with funds from the tax rate stabilization reserve. As this reserve was closely tied to the city's strategic plan and the strategic plan refresh coming before council this coming Monday night, the request for proposal for the core service review will immediately follow. The core service review will be completed in 2024, assisting to determine if the city is over or under delivering in our service, with the results reflected in the 2025 and 2026 budget reconfirmations. Speaking of strategic plan refresh, I will now turn the presentation over to our in-house strategic plan expert, Deputy CAO Ohosky.
Thank you, Director Douglas. So before we move on to the budget presentation too much, just wanted to take a moment to reinforce two themes that we've heard loud and clear from Council under the leadership of our budget chair and vice budget chair. And those two elements are taxpayer affordability lens, as well as tie-ins with the city's strategic plan refresh project. This is the chart. I know Councillor Williamson was referring to earlier that this isn't the first time we're bringing this forward, but thought it might be helpful as a refresh and also to show you how this pie is tracking as we look forward to our 2024 to 2026 multi-year operating budget. So just as a refresh, on the left side of the screen, what you see is our reality. In 2018, we had a $101 million operating budget. Of that, 68% was devoted to those legislative services, provincial, federal, some of our own bylaws, and 24% was services that were not legislated, and 8% was for strategic and community initiatives. When we fast forward to this current calendar year, 2023, what we see is a budget, operating budget of $117 million, which is the same purchasing power as $101 million 5 years ago. 77% now are attributable to legislative services. 13% are the city's own services that we know the community values that aren't related to legislation, as well as 10% for strategic and community initiatives. So what this equates to is of $117 million, we have about $26.9 million that are not legislative. So a relatively small portion. And just, I know Director Douglas is going to speak to the Getting to Zero list shortly, but just to put that in perspective, Getting to Zero requires finding an amount of just about over $4 million, which is about 15% of that $26.9 million. So it's a fairly significant chunk. What the core service review will do next year that Director Douglas spoke to is really take a deep dive into those legislative services. Where are we delivering over the bare minimum, as well as the other services that are comprising the current 13%. Next slide, please. So if we take a look at those same color coding over time, you see the 2018 number that I showed you at the bottom, as well as the 2023 number that was on the previous slide. This is how the proportion of our operating budget is tracking over the course of the multi-year budget. What I really want to reinforce, and this is a huge asterisk on this slide, is that this is based on the legislation we know of that's been announced today. If the last 18 months is any instruction to us, this new announcements are coming at us fast and furious all the time. This is what we know today. So if the announcements trend in the way they have over the last 18 months, this is a huge risk for our organization. And the CAO spoke to earlier, being mindful of the increasing mandates, many of which the outcomes are outcomes we share, the objectives are great objectives, but they aren't coming with the commensurate resources, and some of the traditional funding sources we've relied on are declining. So it's a huge trend to watch over time. Based on what we know today, this is how that taxpayer affordability lens shapes up within the multi-year budget. Again, I will reiterate the asterisk. This is based on announcements that we are aware of that are public information to date. Next slide, please. In terms of the strategic plan refresh project, we promised you that in time for you to consider amendments, for you to consider questions on the budget as the mayor prepares his budget and as council considers what's important to them within the budget, that we would have information regarding the strategic plan refresh to you in time for this process. So I'm pleased to let you know, I think the CAO kind of preempted this announcement, but the strategic plan refresh results from the community survey are already published. They were published yesterday for the November 27th agenda. So those are available to you in a discussion report for Monday, but thought it was important to highlight that all of those results from the October 18th strategic planning session of council, as well as the feedback we received from the public through the survey, are now available to you. So if that's an important input for you to have more information as we consider the strategic plan going forward, it's there for you. As Director Douglas mentioned, we were watching carefully when you were having that October 18th discussion. We do have line of sight to some of the initiatives that you had a lot of green dots on the dotmocracy, and have done our best to include those. What I would suggest and encourage and invite members of council to do, please take part in the budget workshops that the finance team and the senior leadership team are working on putting together. We want to make sure that we're on the same page in terms of what's included in that multi-year budget are things that are important to you. So if there are priorities that you're concerned, is that incorporated in this budget? Is it not? Those budget workshops are a fantastic opportunity for you to come and learn about what's currently accommodated and what isn't, so that you can prepare your decisions during the month of January and potentially February. I would also say, and further to the trend about talking to the multi-year budget over time, there is opportunity for flexibility within the reconfirmation process in 2025 and 2026, should circumstances shift, as they always do, and we need to accommodate those. So we'll make sure that there is that availability for you to ask questions, and as well as that continued flexibility through the reconfirmation process. And back to Director Douglas.
Thank you so much, Erin. So as the city continues our budget improvement process, and with the adoption of our first multi-year budget for 2024 to 2026, let's just pause for a moment and reflect on the benefits of the multi-year budget. A multi-year budget supports council in the implementation of a multi-year vision. It encourages a focus on longer-term goals, provides a greater efficiency and a more predictable financial framework, and it also permits forward-looking analysis and evaluation that enhances financial sustainability and less vulnerability. More importantly, a multi-year budget provides tax and ratepayers and residents with greater certainty regarding the directions of city services, our finances, tax levies, and rates in the longer term. The multi-year budget also provides the city with the opportunity to review and write budgetary rules into policy, and to ensure transparency and accountability in our budgets, which occurred earlier this year with council's approval of the budget planning and control policy. This policy includes establishing budget planning principles, financial controls, roles, and responsibilities to ensure the city budget serves as a financial resourcing plan to implement the goals as set out by council in its strategic plan. The implementation of the multi-year budget is an achievement, another initiative that was recommended by Ernst & Young in the 2019 Audit and Accountability Report, with council and staff modernizing the city's budget process and making this significant advancement in the city's long-term financial sustainability journey. So let's take a look at the numbers. As staff's proposing the 2024 to 2026 multi-year budget, the city's departmental expenditures for 2024 to 2026 will range from $123.3 million in 2024 to $130.5 million in 2026. Add to that the outside boards and commissions, which, based on their budgets presented to Council on November the 1st, range from $9.3 million in 2024 to $10.2 million in 2026. Those total expenditures are reduced by the non-tax revenues, which range from $11.7 million in 2024 and declined to $10.7 million in 2026. Overall, the total tax levy for 2024 to 2026 will range from $120.8 million in 2024 to $130 million in 2026. So now we take those tax levies dollars and translate them into a percentage increase into the city's tax levy, which ranges over the 3 years from 3.47% in 2024 to 3.6% in 2026, with a high of 3.85% in 2025. All of these percentages are within the guidance provided by Council of 3 to 4% annually. Shown here is how those tax dollars are shared based on each $100 of taxes received. They are focused on taking care of what the city owns, maintaining service delivery to our current and growing population, balancing the needs of our local boards, meeting the commitments for prior council decisions, and addressing the impacts and changes in provincial legislation and regulations. Property assessment values are how the tax levy is distributed to each property owner within the city. The city will receive the final roll from the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation the first week of December. Based on the preliminary information received, residential assessment is expected to increase by 0.28% for 2024, and the total for all property classes is expected to increase by 0.52%. This assessment increase is strictly related to growth, as the province continues to defer the reassessment of Ontario properties originally scheduled to occur in 2021 with a valuation date of January the 1st, 2019. It is not known when the province will resume the reassessment. Therefore, property assessment values continue to be based on the last reassessment period, which had a valuation date of January 1st, 2016. Shown here at the top of the graph is the largest portion of the city's assessment base, which is the residential tax class, which represents approximately 80% of the city's total taxable assessment. In addition to property assessment changes, any changes to tax ratios can cause a shift in the responsibility of the levy amongst the various tax classes. Any reduction in the tax ratio of one property tax class will be shared among the other property tax classes. In our two-tiered system, determination of tax ratios is the responsibility of the regional government, and typically the region will set its tax policy in February of the year that it applies. So using the estimated assessment values received from MPAC, the $120.8 million of tax levy dollars required to fund the numerous services provided by the city in 2024 are divided by the city's taxable assessment. For the median home with an assessment of $258,000, the total taxes under the city's legislative authority in 2024 is $1,770.62, which is an increase of $62.71 or 3.67%. In addition to collecting our own property taxes, the city is also responsible for the collection of the tax dollars on behalf of the region of Niagara and the school boards, although the region and the province set their own tax rates. We are unable to show the total impact for the median home for 2024, as the region has not yet approved their tax levy budget for 2024, as well as the education rates have not been determined by the province for 2024. So tonight, staff are recommending the proposed budget that we are presenting. Council directed staff, as part of guidance, to provide options to get to a 0% tax increase in 2024. Staff have fulfilled Council's request to prepare this alternative for 2024. These options, while not recommended by staff, are included in Appendix 4 of the multi-year budget report. Items which have a direct impact on permanent staffing resources are included in a confidential memo in Appendix D and can be found in Council Sugar Sync folder. These alternative in both appendices have been categorized by SLT from minor to major effect. The senior leadership team in the budget office worked collaboratively to provide a list of the various items that would be required for the city's 2024 tax levy budget amount not to increase. Looking at the alternatives, sometimes an inefficiency may lead to a decrease in service level, and this is why certain items were not included in the staff's proposed budget. Summarized here, our high level is what are required for the 0% increase. Closing, consolidating the Older Adult Center in West St. Catharines to amalgamate with the Dunlap Drive Older Adult Center. Closure of the automated washroom due to health and safety concerns and the need for additional FTE to keep it in a good, clean state. Removal of various city programs and service, such as the volunteer recognition, the outdoor rinks, Trillium Awards, youth, and clean city funding. Reducing the operational hours of some facilities. As these recommendations may have an impact on permanent staffing, details are included in the confidential memo. Reduction of service levels, winter control, encampment cleanups, drop minimum staffing for fire services, open carousel only on the weekends, naturalize certain parks, open outdoor pools at 1 p.m., shorten splash pad season by 3 months. Also included in this list is a discontinuation of grants and funding, such as the St. Catharines Cultural Investment Plan funding, support for the Labor Day Parade, the Port Dalhousie fireworks, the folk arts funding, and pausing the facade, accessory dwelling unit, and heritage grants. SLT did not only focus on expenditure reductions, we also looked at potential revenue generation. Some of these items included in the list are the implementation of non-parking AMPS fee for fire services to provide services at motor vehicle collisions, increasing parking violation amounts, and the introduction of a fee for patrons to access city beaches. SLT appreciate that the items listed to get 2024 tax levy increase to 0 would have an impact on the community and are not recommending these changes to service delivery or programs. They are presented to meet council's direction. Staff continue to recommend the budget presented for 2024 with a 3.47 tax levy increase. So as discussed by the CAO at the start of tonight's meeting and also by our budget chair, tonight is just the beginning of the 2024 budget process. There's a lot of information that has been provided to council in the budget documents prepared by city staff. These documents are provided to assist the mayor in his budget development and council deliberation for the city's first multi-year budget. Information provided in the report and the related appendice reflects staff's recommendation to meet our existing service delivery requirements for both current and future populations in alignment with the current strategic plan. To assist council with reviewing and working through the various budget documents, staff had scheduled workshops in the first 2 weeks of December. These workshops are informal and an opportunity for council members to obtain clarification of staff's recommendations, verify council priorities and initiatives included in the draft budget as they prepare their potential amendments to the mayor's budget. As well, there will be a number of public engagement opportunities for council to connect with residents and citizens on what is most important to them in the 2024 to 2026 multi-year budget over the next several weeks. I will now pass on to public engagement. And Mr. Mayor, if you want to speak to the public engagement opportunities, I'll pass it to you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Ms. Douglas, and through you, Chair. The public.
Thank you, Director Douglas, and we will get Mayor Cisco on first.
There we go. Through you, Chair. The list of public engagement is pretty extensive. We have a number of open houses coming up next week on the Tuesday and the Thursday. We also have the telephone town hall where Budget Chair Garcia will join me to do the traditional telephone town hall. We weren't able to do it last year because of the election and everything else, but we want to get back to what has become very much a best practice. We have budget kiosks where staff will be answering questions for the general public in a variety of different locations over the course of the first 2 weeks of December. We have an online public survey, which is going to be opening up on Friday and will run from Friday, November the 24th until December 15th, midway through the month of December as well. And folks can also email budget@stcatharines.ca. I would encourage anybody who's interested in the process to go to stcatharines.ca/budget. That will take them to the Engage STC page. That is where the public survey will be opening up on Friday. That is where all of the information about where the budget kiosks will be located is. It provides a number of explainer videos on on what exactly the budget is, what the 3 different budgets actually are, how they work. And I would, as I said, encourage anybody who's interested in this process to go to those places. I did want to add one more piece with respect to this. Staff have put forward their budget this evening. I appreciate the 3 budgets, and I gave a lot of kudos to the water and wastewater budget folks a little while ago. I should give kudos to the capital budget folks who did a really great job, and also the levy budget folks who did a really fantastic job as well. But I'm going to make a point now that I think is important to state. Staff have made their recommendation. It's contained within the 3 budgets that are in front of us. At this stage, it becomes a political document. So I would encourage my colleagues on council, because I will be presenting a budget, and I will say right now, I know that the budget I'm presenting in January, well, it will look very similar to this. We'll have changes. We'll have additions. We'll have deletions. There will be changes to this budget when I bring it forward in January. But I don't intend to create that budget within a vacuum. I encourage my council colleagues to attend the workshops, bring ideas to me, and if they're ideas that I think are workable, they're going to be incorporated into the budget that I present on January the 3rd. That goes for the public as well. We are running the online public survey from November 24th to December 15th so that I and my team, as well as city staff, have time to synthesize the information that comes in and determine what within that public survey we can incorporate into the budget that will allow the city to work towards its goal of sustainability, of maintaining the city services that are integral, that people depend on, while also balancing the need for taxpayer affordability. Staff have said it a number of times. I know the budget chair has reiterated this comment a number of times. I will reiterate it as well. Taxpayer affordability is a major part of this budget process. We know the challenges that we went through over the last year. We are trying to make sure that the city's finances are in a good position, but we also have to keep in mind taxpayer affordability. So again, I would strongly encourage members of the public to go to stcatharines.ca/budget. Look at the information that is there. The budget that was just presented by staff, the draft budget, is up. It is there for people to be able to read through, to drill through the details. There are videos and a lot of other explanatory information. The email address to be able to get feedback through is there. And again, the public survey will open up on Friday. I know my social media will be pushing the public survey every day during the period of November 24th to December 15th, because we want to hear the feedback. And again, I would strongly encourage my council colleagues, any ideas that they have, any thoughts that they have about what we can do to make this budget work with all of the different priorities we are trying to balance, please give those ideas to me as early as possible, because if we can incorporate them into the budget, I want that to happen. Like I said, I don't want to create this budget in a vacuum. I want this to be a collaborative process so that what comes forward on January 3rd is not a surprise to anybody. What comes forward on January 3rd is something that many voices have had a hand in creating. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for those very thoughtful comments, and I will now entertain questions for staff, and I believe I have Councillor Dodge first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just watching and listening to the mayor just now, there was several things that were mentioned that we could do, the town hall meeting and different things like that, and the kiosks and whatnot, but there was no times or locations for those, as well as the public open houses. Is there somewhere that people can find that out, or can we let people know this evening where they were? Because on the list, it was just dates, no locations, and no times.
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Chair. Because the slide is only so big, staff weren't able to fit all of the information. I would encourage folks stcatharines.ca/budget. All of the information is there, all of the dates, all of the times, all of the locations. But I can say Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday next week, the budget telephone town hall is Wednesday. It will be from 7 to 8. And if people want to make sure that they are contacted, they can register through stcatharines.ca/budget. November 28th and November 30th will be the budget open houses. And as I stall for time to bring it up on my calendar, I can say that the budget open house on the 30th is the one at the Kiwanis Aquatic Center, and it will be from 6 to 7. The budget open house on the 28th is at the Seymour Hanna 4-pad, and that will be from 6 to 7 p.m. as well on the Tuesday. So those are those 3 dates for next week. The kiosk dates and times are all, as I said, on the website, stcatharines.ca/budget.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I also pointed out at the beginning that nice schedule chart that the clerk sent to us, and it lists all of those dates and specific events at each of the dates. Councilor Dodge, any further questions?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, Councilor Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. One question I have, with the staff recommendation at 3.47, and I mean, the mayor's budget is coming out as well, and even if we were to bring this down, and let's just say, to be happy, at a 2% like has historically happened, what are we going to do when the region comes in at like their 7.5 or 8% again? How are we going to deal with that? Like, it seems like we're waiting to hear from them so we don't get the flack like last year. But I mean, we're scraping at the bottom of the barrel here to save money everywhere we can, and we keep it as low and as close to zero as possible. And then the region comes in at a 7+. How are we going to explain that to people?
Thank you for that question, Councilor Stevens. I wanted to make a comment first, if I may, and that is, you're quite right. I mean, we can only control the portion that we can control, and the region is going to come in where they do, and the tax increase or rate that our taxpayers will see, as we know, will be a blended rate between ours, the region, and the school board. However, we're doing our best to keep that down. From what I read in the paper, I haven't been to the council meetings at the region, the mayor has. They seem to be struggling a lot to try to keep it down as well. But anyway, I will let the CAO comment. CAO Oaks?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We referenced this back in the summer when a lot of the discussion was happening around the horseshoe with the tax rates and the implication of the regional and municipal blending. What we had talked about and what we are doing, the region's budget is scheduled to be completed in the month of December, and that will help to inform, and that's partly the reason why the mayor's budget has been sort of deferred into January to be able to have and provide some better input. So I believe and I understand that the region is still on track. We're talking to them through the treasurers and finance, on a weekly, daily basis. The intent has always been to try to be able to showcase what that blended rate will be, and that's why we've sort of deferred the city portion into 2024.
Thank you, CAO Oaks. Any other questions? I have Councilor Ratliff.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Just two questions, and they might be related, but I forget what page they're on. The actual and the budgeted numbers, there's often like a really large gap between those numbers. So I think in the most recent numbers that we have is 15 million between what was actually spent and what was budgeted. I think it was for 2022, 2023, I can't remember. Is that gap, what's historically been that gap? Is that something you just expect every year, that the difference between the actual and the budget is that much? And then, I suspect, seeing how many vacancies we have, it's primarily due to vacancies, but maybe it's not. And I'm wondering why that gap exists.
Thank you for that. I will look to Director Douglas. My understanding is that a lot of it has to do recently from difficulties that we're having recruiting competent staff, but I will let Director Douglas address that.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, you are correct that there is often a difference between the amount that we budget and where our actuals end up for the year. We do have a policy which indicates that any amount of that surplus at the end of the year goes into the tax rate stabilization reserve, which then can be utilized to assist the budget in future years. And one of the main causes in recent years to creating that difference between budget and actuals is our challenges in recruiting staffing. There are also, times when we build the budget, we start building the budget early in the year and we forecast and do the best that we can to estimate. And sometimes things come in under budget, sometimes things come in within budget, sometimes they come in under budget, and at the end of the day, what we have is that surplus amount. It has one of the changes that we did make with moving to the multi-year budget is we used to include a portion, and it was 1% of the previous year's tax levy as a non-tax revenue to help the next year's budget. But moving into a multi-year budget, you're never really sure that you're going to have that type of surplus. So we have removed that from the budget, and we fully removed that in the 2023 budget. So now we don't have that unknown item. So all surplus amounts from the previous year will roll into that tax rate stabilization reserve to be utilized for initiatives that council would like to see. We do use some of it in our budget for one-time items.
Thank you, Director.
If I may, a follow-up question through you, Chair.
Yes.
And then, then there's the vacancy question. I think it said 55, is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, yes, in our Q3 report, there are currently approximately 55 vacancies. That does fluctuate as we're constantly, in the recruitment process.
So, yeah, I see that there's lots of work being done on recruitment, I guess. And I'm sure the answer to this question is yes, but, if it's a matter of spending more to bring in staff, does this multi-year budget taking that into consideration?
Director?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, I would say yes, there are various initiatives included within the multi-year budget that would accommodate and address that.
I guess I would just hope that, in future years, the number is less than 55, right? If at some point, we're just not gonna have staff to do the work that we need to get done. And it's gonna, if it's not already affecting service levels, it's going to start affecting service levels. So I guess just putting that on the radar is something that I know staff's already working hard to address. But, at some point, I guess we got to talk about spending more money on that part of our budget. And so, if a 3.4% increase doesn't get us the staff we need to do the services, then that's something we got to discuss. So, thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Ratliff. And I have Councilor Miller.
Yeah, thank you. And this is going to be a bit of a niche question, so I know there's going to be opportunities to get this answered if staff don't have it offhand. But just talking about some of those, surprises maybe we get from the provincial and federal government. There was a couple news stories this week about London and the region of Waterloo losing money that maybe they were expecting through the provincial funding. I think it's Build Better, Faster Homes Fund, or some subtle name like that, because they didn't have enough housing starts. Is that a concern of ours? Are we counting on that money in a budget, or do we treat that as sort of surplus money?
I will ask our CAO to address that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as you'll recall, in the 2023 budget, we did some significant investments in new staff in the planning area in particular to be able to address some of the challenges that we were going to run into. The challenge over and above, there are still a few pieces of legislation and regulation that haven't come out yet, so there's a bit of an unknown. However, the specific to the housing starts and some of the you know, and this is across the board, the building, you know, with interest rates and cost of materials and cost of builds has slowed down quite significantly. And there is work being done at the advocacy level with both the provincial and the federal government. We were actually just in Ottawa yesterday and today, talking about the Housing Accelerator Fund and being able to, you know, receive some dollars to support a lot of our operating and capital endeavors to support the housing system, for lack of a better term. But there are challenges. We have tried to accommodate and include in the multi-year budget a conservative estimate. So if we do run into challenges, we have that built into the multi-year budget. And then we also have, you know, the 25 and 26 budgets have to be reconfirmed at council. So if there are sort of adjustments that happen, whether it's provincial or federal legislation, we can address them at that point in time.
Thank you, CAO Oakes. Councilor Miller?
Oh, okay, yeah, that's sufficient for me. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from council? Seeing none, I have one question and a couple of comments. So my question to the Director of Finance is, I know that there was a confidential memo in Sugar Sink from the library following up on our requests at the last meeting, but there were several referrals requesting more information. Do you know when those are coming in, and will they then be shared with us either directly or in Sugar Sink if they're confidential?
Through you, Mr. Chair, my understanding is are you speaking with the referrals from the Meridian Center as well as the Performing Arts Center? Those memos were included here in the correspondence for this agenda. So they're there for the committee members and council to review and utilize to support their deliberations and review and amendments to the mayor's budget, and also for the mayor to review in the development of his budget.
Thank you. And did we get one from the Performing Arts Center as well?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. So I wanted to echo what Mayor Cisco said about the work that staff has done on this is excellent. The presentations were really good. I noticed that we did include business cases for new positions that are being recommended, so we can consider those. And there's an awful lot of information there. That's what I'm saying. I do want to thank staff. I know this took a tremendous amount of work, but as the mayor said, please make sure you go through this. We got some time. You attend the events that we have to for further information and getting input from the community. And most important, I think, of what he said is that we give him our input in terms of what we would like to see in the budget that he's going to present. So thank you for that. And with that, I will ask for someone to make the motion, call for the report. Okay. Don? Okay. Councilor Dodge, and a seconder, Mayor Cisco. Okay. And I will call, any further discussion? I think we've covered it. Okay. I will ask the deputy clerk to call for a recorded vote.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Lindell.
Yes.
Councillor McPherson.
Yes.
Counselor Miller,
Yes.
Counselor Ratzlaff,
Yes.
Counselor Stevens,
Yes.
Counselor Williamson,
Yes.
Mayor Cisco,
Approved.
and Chair Garcia.
Yes.
And that's carried.
Okay, we will move to 9 motions. There are none. 10, call for notices of motions. Are there any notice of motions for the next council budget meeting? Seeing none. Report requests. Are there any report requests? Again, seeing none. Sorry. Number 12, closed session. There's no closed session. So we will move to bylaws. Number 14, and the motion on the bylaws is that the bylaw listed on the council budget agenda be read the first time, considered and passed. A bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its council budget meeting held on the 22nd of November 2023. One reading with respect to confirming the proceedings of the meeting held on November 22nd, 2023, that it be signed and executed by the chair and the deputy clerk. Can I have a councilor make that motion? Councilor Stevens. Can I have a seconder? Mayor Cisco. All in favor? Opposed? So that is carried. So now we come to Councilor Miller's favorite motion, that there be no further items of business, the meeting be adjourned. Can I have, Councilor Miller, would you make that? Okay. And a seconder, Councilor Lindo. All in favor? Okay. Thank you, everybody.